Arrest her. She destroyed community property. That's what Elaine Collins, our HOA president, screamed at police while my wife Emily stood frozen, holding nothing but a brand new padlock. She had replaced the rusted lock on our lake cabin gate. Our cabin, our gate. Somehow that simple act turned into flashing sirens, neighbors gawking, and 3 patrol cars swarming our property like we'd committed a felony. The day had started quietly. Emily sipped coffee on the deck, sketching lesson plans for her students, while I checked the old gate that had been hanging by rust since my grandfather passed the cabin down to us. Emily, tired of fighting it every weekend, finally bought a $20 replacement lock from the hardware store. Nothing fancy, just one that actually worked. I was inside flipping bacon when the sirens hit. 3 cruisers tore down our quiet lake road like they were chasing a bank robber. When I stepped outside, Emily was standing by the gate holding the broken lock, staring in disbelief. Behind her, Elaine pointed at my wife as if she'd caught a vandal red-handed, ranting about community property destruction. Officer Martinez, the first to arrive, wore the look every cop gets when they realize dispatch sent them to nonsense. Elaine launched into a speech about unauthorized modifications and neighborhood security. Emily just held up the broken lock, cheeks red with humiliation. I showed Martinez our deed. The gate was clearly on our land, 10 feet inside the boundary line. His patience thinned as Elaine insisted it was community infrastructure. Another officer stepped in, explaining this wasn't criminal but a civil HOA issue, and that wasting 911 resources like this bordered on abuse of emergency services. Elaine's fury grew as the officers shut her down. They filed a report stating no crime had been committed. Emily even demonstrated how the old lock crumbled apart in her hands. By the time the patrol cars left, Elaine was still in our driveway, ranting about HOA authority, while we just stood there wondering what we'd inherited along with my grandfather's cabin. That night, I called my buddy, Sheriff Anderson. He laughed when I told him 3 cars had responded to a padlock replacement. Sounds like someone exaggerated to dispatch, he said. File a records request for the 911 call. I bet she spun quite a story. He was right. 5 days later, we had the recording. Elaine had told dispatch there were suspicious individuals tampering with security equipment, possibly vandalizing community property. She even urged them to send multiple units. But then came the part that froze us in our kitchen. Elaine dropped her husband's name, Robert Collins of Lakefront Development Solutions. She claimed upcoming development projects made our cabin gate a matter of community security. In other words, this wasn't about HOA rules at all. It was about business. Emily dug deeper. Within hours, she uncovered Robert's company plans, massive luxury resort projects mapped directly onto our stretch of lakefront. Every neighboring property had already been sold. Ours was the last holdout. In my grandfather's papers, we found why. Our cabin carried zoning protections dating back to the 1980s. Developers couldn't touch this land or build their road without our consent. We weren't just stubborn neighbors. We were the obstacles standing between Robert Collins and a multimillion-dollar resort empire. And Elaine? She wasn't just an HOA president on a power trip. She was the enforcer for her husband's business plan. Elaine Collins knew the system. 20 years as a city clerk had taught her how zoning, permits, and property codes could be weaponized. And Emily's research proved it. Every family who sold to Robert Collins's development company had first been hammered with sudden HOA crackdowns. Elaine used her title as HOA president not for community safety, but as a calculated pressure tool to push people off their land. We were the last holdouts. And Elaine had no intention of letting us win. The harassment began that Monday at dawn. Elaine showed up in our driveway, clipboard in hand, snapping photos like a crime scene investigator. The violation notice she handed over didn't even mention the gate lock. Instead, she accused us of having deck railings below code and an illegal shoreline fire pit. Pure fabrication, but dressed up in official HOA formatting. Tuesday, she escalated. 2 cars blocked our gate, trapping us on our own property. Elaine stood smugly by, arms crossed, claiming the blockade was a temporary traffic control measure. I told her flat out it was trespassing and false imprisonment. Emily photographed the plates while I called Sheriff Anderson. Elaine's face never wavered. She was clearly testing how far she could push before we broke. Wednesday, a new blow, a notice taped to our door claiming we owed $3,700 in violations. Gate modifications. Deck issues. Shoreline usage. Failure to comply. All fake. The number led to a polished voicemail system, but no real human contact. Emily shook her head. Elaine was manufacturing debt to pressure us into selling. By Thursday, she went after our neighbors. Elaine collected signatures for a petition against our cabin, warning families that our property was unsafe, collapsing, even dangerous to their children. Many signed without understanding the details, just trusting their HOA president's expertise. Mrs. Patterson, our elderly next-door neighbor, confessed she signed only because Elaine told her our cabin might slide into the lake during a storm. Emily nearly exploded when she heard. Elaine wasn't just harassing us anymore, she was terrorizing vulnerable neighbors with lies. That evening, Emily organized our evidence. Fake fines, driveway blockades, fraudulent notices, even the petition. She said what I already knew, this wasn't petty HOA drama. It was criminal harassment designed to force a property sale. Sheriff Anderson confirmed it. His department had fielded similar complaints about Elaine for years, but most families folded under the pressure and sold. She knows exactly what she's doing, he told me. Be ready. She won't stop until you either give up or she crosses a line big enough for us to nail her. That line came Monday morning. Elaine arrived with two men in official-looking uniforms, introducing them as municipal compliance officers, Agent Martinez and Agent Davis. They handed us what looked like a court order demanding we appear before a judge within 72 hours or face property seizure. The documents had seals, case numbers, and citations. To anyone else, they would have looked real. But Emily had worked as a paralegal. She spotted flaws instantly. The formatting was off, the case numbers wrong, the judge's signature fake. When she called the courthouse on speakerphone, the clerk confirmed, no such case existed and no such agents worked there. The fraud unraveled right in our driveway. And then it got worse. A cameraman appeared, tipped off by Elaine, ready to film our humiliation as fake officers served us. But Emily turned the tables, declaring loudly on camera that the documents were fraudulent and the men were impersonating officials, a federal crime. Neighbors gathered. The cameraman realized he was filming a setup, not a scandal, and shut his camera off. Martinez and Davis fled, abandoning their props. Elaine froze where she stood, caught red-handed. She had escalated beyond HOA harassment. She had forged the authority of the court. Detective Morrison arrived within the hour, collecting the fraudulent seals and papers as evidence. Her words were clear. This isn't civil harassment anymore. This is federal. Elaine's power play had just crossed into felony territory. What started as harassment had now crossed into felony territory. Elaine wasn't just a difficult neighbor anymore. She was committing crimes that could end up in federal court. Monday morning, Emily found the proof taped to our cabin door. A lien notice demanding $8,400 in fines, penalties, and fees. At first glance, it looked terrifyingly real. County seals, legal language, even foreclosure timelines. But when we spread it across our kitchen table, the truth came out. The charges were for violations we'd never been notified about, retroactive fines for deck repairs, shoreline use, and compliance issues dating back months before we even inherited the cabin. Emily spotted the flaws immediately. Fonts didn't match. Seals were misaligned. It wasn't county paperwork at all, it was a professional forgery. She documented everything while I called the clerk's office. Their answer was blunt. No liens existed. The notice was fake. Elaine had stolen county letterhead and forged signatures in a full-scale property fraud attempt. Instead of backing down, Emily decided to go public. She set up a live stream on our deck, the lake glimmering in the background, and invited neighbors to watch. On camera, she displayed every forged document, explaining how families could be tricked into surrendering their homes to fake debts. Over 300 people tuned in. Some recognized the same tactics in their own neighborhoods. That's when Detective Morrison arrived. She didn't mince words. Forging county documents wasn't harassment anymore, it was federal crime. The FBI would now expand their investigation into systematic property fraud. By Friday, Elaine tried one last move, an emergency HOA meeting. The notice accused us of endangering community safety and listed our cabin as the problem. We knew this was her attempt to rally the neighborhood against us. When Sunday night came, the community center was packed. Elaine had staged the room like a courtroom, complete with blown-up photos of our cabin, violation charts, and evidence packets for every neighbor. She delivered a dramatic speech, painting us as dangerous rebels defying legitimate authority. Some people nodded along. Then Emily stood up. Neighbors insisted she be heard. She connected her laptop to the sound system and played Elaine's own 911 call, the one where she lied to dispatchers, claiming we were criminals vandalizing community property. Gasps filled the room. Neighbors looked around in disbelief as they realized Elaine had fabricated emergencies to weaponize law enforcement. Emily followed with photos of fake credentials and forged lien letters, explaining step by step how Elaine had escalated from false police reports to government impersonation. The tide turned. Neighbors who once signed her petitions now apologized, furious at being manipulated. And that's when the walls closed in. Detective Morrison walked in with 2 federal agents and announced the meeting was now part of an FBI investigation. Elaine's campaign against us had just transformed into evidence of organized criminal conspiracy. Days later, the FBI sat at our kitchen table with thick files of evidence. Agents Williams and Rodriguez explained the truth. Elaine and her husband Robert had been running this scheme for years. Our case was the missing puzzle piece in an investigation spanning multiple communities, families pressured with fake violations, fraudulent liens, and forged inspections until they sold their homes. At least 12 properties had already been stolen this way. This wasn't neighborhood drama anymore. It was organized crime, and now the federal government was closing in. Most families Elaine targeted had simply given up, selling their homes and walking away rather than fighting years of harassment. That surrender had made her scheme incredibly profitable. Using intimidation, forged documents, and fake officials, Elaine and Robert had acquired millions in prime lakefront property for their development empire. But our decision to fight back, methodically documenting every forgery, every lie, every call, gave federal agents what they had been missing: hard evidence. Agent Rodriguez laid out the plan. A sting operation. Emily and I would pretend to cave, to finally sell our cabin to Robert's company. The FBI would wire us up, record every move, and catch Elaine in the act. My stomach churned, but Emily squeezed my hand. We were in. The phone call went exactly as scripted. Emily told Elaine we were tired of the fight and ready to sell. Elaine could barely hide her excitement. Within hours, she and Robert showed up with 2 so-called federal compliance officers, carrying clipboards, cameras, and a pile of contracts. We played our roles, exhausted, defeated, desperate to escape the harassment. Robert pushed a lowball offer, citing compliance issues and federal investigations that supposedly lowered our property value. Elaine leaned in, smiling like a predator closing the kill, pressuring us to sign on the spot. That's when the door burst open. Agent Williams and 3 FBI agents stormed in, badges out. Federal agents. You're under arrest for conspiracy and systematic property fraud. Elaine froze, her triumph draining into panic. Robert and the fake officers were cuffed before they could even react. The fraudulent contracts and staged equipment were seized. Years of intimidation and lies ended in less than 10 minutes. For the first time in months, Emily and I stood on our deck and breathed freely, watching the criminals who had terrorized us led away in handcuffs. Weeks later, in federal court, Elaine and Robert faced the full weight of justice. Conspiracy, forgery, government impersonation, 911 abuse, fraud. Their attorney pushed for a plea deal. There was no fighting the mountain of evidence. Elaine admitted to orchestrating harassment campaigns against 12 families over 3 years, generating more than $8 million in stolen property. She had used her decades of clerical experience to create convincing fake documents and intimidate families into surrendering homes that had been in their families for generations. Emily delivered a victim impact statement that silenced the courtroom. "Your Honor," she turned my attempt to change a broken gate lock into a federal crime scene. She made me terrified to care for my grandfather's cabin, using fake authority to make me feel like a criminal for protecting my own inheritance. I followed with my own words. My grandfather built that cabin with his hands. Elaine weaponized government power to try and steal it. She forced ordinary families like us to become legal experts just to defend our most basic rights. Judge Thompson was clear. Impersonating government authority to terrorize citizens was an attack on the very foundation of public trust. Elaine received 18 months in federal prison, 3 years probation, and full restitution. Robert was sentenced to 2 years, with forfeiture of all fraudulently obtained properties and dissolution of their company. One by one, other victims testified. Families who'd been bullied into selling at half value. Neighbors who'd spent savings on fake repairs to avoid fabricated penalties. Their stories painted the full scope of Elaine's predatory empire. The final gavel struck, echoing like thunder. Justice had arrived. When Emily and I returned home, we replaced the cabin's gate lock once again. This time, we added a small brass plaque she designed. "Reed Family Property, protected by federal court order." The sun caught it just right, shining like a symbol of everything we had fought for. What began with a $20 lock had nearly destroyed us. But in the end, it brought down an empire of fraud, and proved that when ordinary families stand their ground, even the most powerful schemes can collapse. Maybe the real lesson here is that control freaks will always push until someone pushes back. If you're still here, I'd love to know in the comments how you'd handle a neighbor like this. And if you want to support the channel, you can always hit the thanks button below. Stay sharp, protect what's yours, and don't ever let anyone rewrite the rules of your own front gate. We're tell times, and this is just one of many unbelievable tales. Catch more by checking out the next video. Promise it's even wilder.